Hey guys, so such an interesting video on Wild Rift. So we're back with the patch 3.3 review. And this is gonna be a really long one. Now just a small update. I managed to recover from COVID about 2 days or 3 days ago, so now I'm completely fine. So now we can actually jump straight into the patch notes itself. But before that, because this is a very long patch notes, I'm actually not going to fully discuss a couple of things, and that's going to be two particular things. The first thing is I'm not going to actually read out the actual champion changes like I usually do. So what do I mean by that? For example, I'm not going to say like, oh, the cooldown of the ultimate was reduced from 75 seconds at first rank to 65 seconds, that kind of thing. So I'll just let you guys see the numbers for yourself, and we're going to just discuss the actual changes because I think this is going to be a really long video. And aside from that, we're also going to not discuss as in depth some things that we discussed a lot already. For example, Elemental Rift and Legendary Q, which I have made a video on Legendary Q itself discussing it for about 10 minutes or so. So I'm not going to discuss those topics for as long. That's a non-exhaustive list. So anyways, now as of the starting of the recording of this video, it's a couple of minutes from when this patch is actually going to be dropping. So after I make this video, I will be updating to that patch and trying out all the new stuff and all. So anyways, let's quickly jump straight into the patch note itself. And so first up, we got an ARAM progression track. Basically, you will get exclusive seasonal titles, so there's no like ARAM ranked or anything like that. You will just get seasonal titles based on how much you play ARAM, and I'm assuming based on your performance. Now, it's not a really big deal for most people, but personally, I play a lot of ARAM. I find ARAM very enjoyable, so I do like that there's something to show off for playing ARAM. So next up, controls. There's a new on button down, which basically means that those spells that aren't aimed or targeted, as you guys can see, they will activate a few frames quicker. So think about a lot of those self buff spells like Tristana Q, Vayne E, even those auto tech enhancers like Darius W or Jax W are those that I can think of, should mean that they activate a little bit faster. So yeah, I guess that's of course good. So basically everybody should be turning this on, no reason to turn it off. Next, we have Elemental Rift. So of course we do have the removal of the Cloud Dragon, which is in my opinion the most OP dragon at the moment. So it is now going to be live in a couple of minutes. And basically we also have the of course Elemental Rift itself, where Infernal burns away brushes and walls, Ocean adds honey fruit and brush, and Mountain grows extra walls. So what they gone with in the end is not having a soul system at all. Of course, they tested 4 versions of Elemental Rift, and the one that they chose to go with is actually the one where you get stacking buffs. So when you get the first dragon, for example, if the first dragon is Infernal, you get a 4% damage AD and AP increase. And if you get a second dragon, let's say you get a mountain dragon, both of your dragons will go to tier 2, which basically means your original Infernal dragon now gives 8% extra damage, and your mountain dragon now gives 12 plus 6% extra armor and magic resist. Let's say you get a third dragon, the ocean dragon, all 3 of your dragon buffs will go to tier 3, where you get the 12% damage increase, the 18 plus 9% armor and magic resist increase, and the 9% missing health regeneration. So basically, dragon stacking is now gonna be kind of a thing despite not having a soul. And this basically makes it that you can actually have a dragon win condition. Now, if you get like 3 dragons or even like 2, like 3 dragons, you get like a 12% extra damage increase. That is nothing to scoff at. And extra 9% missing health regeneration. That's huge when you're trying to like cover and do like the Baron dance or the Elder Dragon dance. And more defenses, of course, that's great as well. So stacking 3 dragons is going to be a very viable win condition. So you definitely cannot ignore dragons. Not that anybody was ignoring them in the first place. Dragons are kind of hotly contested. Anyway, so this could mean more focus on dragon and less on herald, especially on second dragon and second herald. Why is that the case? We'll get to that at the end of the video, because there are some turret plating changes. So anyways, next up we have the Elder Dragon, which of course gives you a 60 true damage burn over 3 seconds and gives you an execute when an enemy goes below 15% health. So this is of course basically a game ending buff that lasts for 2 minutes, and basically this is an automatic teamfight win. Like, it's almost impossible to lose a teamfight with the Elder Dragon, true damage burn, and the execute. So basically whichever team wins the Elder Dragon should normally get a team fight win, which normally results in the game ending, or at least like a baron and a lot of map control, like if you were behind, for example. And dragons will spawn at 5 minutes and respawn at every 5 minutes. So basically, the first dragon spawns at 5 minutes. The second dragon spawns around, let's say, somewhere between 10 to 12 minutes, depending on when the first dragon was taken. And the third dragon should respawn somewhere around like 16 to like 18 minutes, roughly, based on when the first and second dragons were taken. So normally, majority of games, you should be seeing all three dragons. If there was a delay in taking the first or second dragon, then you'll only see two. But the Elder Dragon will spawn at 20 minutes, with any other dragon despawning at 19 minutes. The Elemental Rift comes in after the first dragon. I don't think I mentioned that yet. And the Elder Dragon respawns every 4 minutes. So basically, the point of this is that basically Elder Dragon is going to cap Wild Rift games. Like, you're not going to be having those like 30 plus minute games, or at least they will be extremely, extremely rare. Because the moment one team gets Elder Dragon, basically, normally a team fight will basically end the game after that, because that team will normally win the team fight. So games shouldn't last past 25 minutes, in my opinion. After like at most, probably you'll see two Elder Dragons like in 99% of games. I don't think games will last anywhere longer than 25 minutes. So we of course have the ranked updates. Now, by the way, as a small side note, I kind of was a bit sad that the soul system wasn't there. I thought the final version of the soul system, where the first dragon gives like 1 point, and like subsequent dragons give like, the first two dragons give 1 point and subsequent dragons give 2 points, kind of thing. I thought that was a pretty good system, but I guess they decided to go with this one, which is still fine. Now, ranked updates, of course, in like 2 days time, the ranked will of course end. The ranked season will end and there will be a new one. So this one, not going to talk about it too much, because basically the changes are that from all the way from Iron all the way to Challenger, you'll now have marks. No more VP system for Diamond and above. For each tier of Diamond, you need 6 marks to get to the next tier, so even more than Emerald. And now when you get to Master Plus, you will just have like, for example, Master 20 marks, or like you have like Challenger 60 marks, something like that. So you will just accumulate marks for each win and loss. So now, the part that I'm actually going to briefly discuss is in my video that I created on this. I actually talked about how I think this will make it, most people think it'll make it easier to climb through Diamond, but I thought it will actually make it harder, because at that point in time, the gains and losses at Diamond you get are plus 15, minus 10 for each win and loss respectively, which basically means that even if you have like a, what is that, like a 40% win rate or so, you would still climb just based on how you gain more points for winning. But now, as of the recording of this video, after patch 3.2b, now the gains and losses are a bit different. Now, when you win a game, you get about 12 to 14 VP, and when you lose a game, you minus like 11 or 12, which is still less, but I've been getting a lot of like plus 12, minus 12, plus 12, minus 12, which basically means it's equivalent, which basically means to actually climb a rank in Diamond, I'm gonna have to win roughly about 8 matches, I think 8 or 9 matches to actually rank up in one rank of Diamond, and assuming that's like plus 12 and minus 12, so basically now I only need to win 6, so it actually makes it easier to rank up in Diamond now after the change that came in patch 3.2b. And also you have the Fortitude Shield, which also makes it a little bit easier, and especially if you're a good player, even in losing matches, you gain a lot of Fortitude. Now, I know this because of my Smurf account, where I'm in Emerald at the moment, and I still get a lot of Fortitude in my losses. So roughly every like 3 matches or so, you can actually get the Fortitude Shield if you play well for all those 3 matches, which basically makes it a lot easier to climb up in Diamond. So yes, now it will be easier to climb up in Diamond. Now, of course, aside from that, we got the new Legendary queue, where you have to be Diamond Plus to enter the queue. Will only be available during certain hours of the day, and leaks show that those hours are 1800 hours to 2359 hours. So it is a pretty huge range, but it's at like evening to nighttime, which I assume is where a lot of people play their games, like after school, after work, that kind of thing. And there'll be 6 new major ranks with ranks 4 to 1 in each rank. Now, this was a typo on the legendary ranked page that they posted that I went through, because it said from 6 to 1. I read it out as 4 to 1, but someone in the comments did point out that I was reading it wrong, and they were right. But apparently that Riot was wrong, and they had a typo, so it's actually 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1. Now, from what the leaks show, you need about, I think you need like 100 points to rank up between ranks, and each win gives you like about plus 40 something. So this is of course because you only are gated by the play time, like the certain hours of the day. You can't play this rank mode, so I guess it's kind of reasonable, but we'll see how easy it is to climb from warrior to legend. Supposedly should be difficult considering how you only have high elo players playing in that. Alright, so next up, Wild Pass. Next Wild Pass is Karma, and the leaks show that after you complete the Wild Pass, you will be able to get like recurring rewards where you like sort of like how when you complete the rank season trend, you can sort of keep getting that chest again, and sort of there'll be like a Wild Pass store. I'm not too sure if that is the case, but it could be here. So, now we have the Star Guardian events and the redeemed Star Guardian event, but it's coming only tomorrow. Like one full 24 hours after the actual release of the patch. But regardless, the event information has already released on the events tab of the Wild Rift like website. Like for example, here you can see like redeem Star Guardian event. The information is already here, and so is the Star Guardian event. It's also on here. So if you guys want to check out what the event is all about, it's over there, and it's a very very huge event. Like it's a long and very huge event. That's all I'll say. It's almost a month, and it's a really huge event. Yeah. So now we're going to move on to the champion changes. Now, long story cut short, Ahri is getting her PC update. So what's happening is whenever you get a takedown, your passive, which is the lifesteal thing, will automatically activate. So when you kill someone, you will automatically heal for this amount here. Foxfire improved logic, not too sure what that means. Your charm no longer gives you damage amplification. However, your spirit rush will now reset on takedown. So basically, the way it's phrased is that it will reset when you trigger the essence theft on takedown, but basically more or less is what it is on takedown you will get another charge of your ultimate, which will give you an extra dash. Now this change for Ahri in PC made her meta, made her S plus tier, and made her viable in pro play. So I'm expecting Wild Rift to be similar, where basically Ahri should become one of the best mid laners because the extra mobility that you get off of a spirit rush, off of getting takedowns, basically is only really balanced by the fact that you lost 20% damage amplification on charm. But this actually is a good thing because last time to play Ahri properly, you have to hit your charm in order to get off your damage. But now you don't even have to necessarily hit your charm to really get off your damage, because you don't have to rely on the damage amplification on your charm anymore. So I actually think that it's a buff all across the board, despite charm getting the damage amplification removed. So I actually think it's kind of a buff all across the board. And take note that they're giving her a reset mechanic that isn't really balanced by like, that isn't really meant wasn't part of her original kit and isn't balanced as such. So like, other reset champions like Katarina have a lot of, they're built that way, so they're balanced that way, but she kind of isn't. And yeah, so really Ahri should be really strong now. Now next up we have Annie, who's getting like base movement speed and armor nerfs, not gonna matter too much, but she's getting her Q buffed, where you get increased 20% projectile speed as well as increased 0.25 explosion radius. Now, I don't think this is going to matter too much, any of these changes at all, but this is pretty nice for like hitting Qs onto people. Diana is getting a nerf on her E by just a little bit. However, taking note that when you're in team fights, you generally cast your E multiple times, dashing across multiple targets. It overall will reduce her damage by quite a bit, because you do get this off multiple times on multiple targets. So I guess it is something quite significant, but I don't think it will hurt her too much. I still think Diana's pretty good. Now Mundo getting a pretty huge buff. Now normally when you ult, you will heal a X amount of health before regenerating over a certain amount of time. Now the X amount of health is now going to be 15, 20, 25, which is actually a pretty huge amount compared to what it was. So you're going to get a little bit more at your max rank, but a little bit less at your base rank. But Mundo kind of scales really well anyway, but gets a lot of items. And that 25% is going to be a lot more than the initial 15% because of how much health you're stacking as well. Now Galio, he's getting a pretty huge buff in my opinion. So his health per level is, and is going up like a little bit, which doesn't really matter. But his Shield of Duran, movement speed reduction when charged, is going down by 10%. Now, of course, you guys remember that Galio did get the nerf that his expansion on his W was nerfed. Now, because of that, it's a lot easier to escape from his W, but to compensate for that, now they're giving him a movement speed, less movement speed reduction. So it should be easier to, like, get in range of people as your circle is expanding to taunt them. And this, of course, basically makes it easier to hit the taunt, which basically kind of offsets the previous nerf in a way. So yeah, it's kind of like that, where it's gonna be a little about the same as what it was, in my opinion at least. All right, so next up we have Jax. So Jax is kind of getting nerfed out of the jungle in my opinion. So what the change is, basically he gets a little bit of base AD buff. However, his passive no longer stacks on monsters. So it basically means you don't get attack speed when you're hitting monsters anymore. Now this will basically mean that his jungle clear will be a lot slower. Now whether this will kick him out of the jungle or not is still a question mark. Now you gotta remember that there are junglers like Wukong who did get their passive effect removed on jungle monsters. So like Wukong no longer does like increasing percentage damage to jungle monsters anymore. That hurt his clear a lot. But in the end, despite having a really poor first clear, just because of how good his team fight is, Wukong jungle is still like popular to this day. So whether this will kick him out of the jungle or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that this is gonna hurt his clear speed by a lot. Now Jax is of course a 1v9 hyper carry champion that can carry your team in late game. So it is still possible that in solo queue you pick him in the jungle and you really only turn online like deep into the game, but it is still possible. However, he's getting a lot of buffs to compensate for the fact that he's basically gonna get kicked out of jungle and gonna be a Baron laner. Now you only need to stack 5 times instead of stacking like 10 times, and you get 1 stack per hit. Whether you hit on minions or champions, there's no doubling anymore. Now this doubling system was basically because of the jungle thing, where you only get 1 stack per jungle monster, but you get 2 stacks for minions and champions, kind of trying to kick him out of the jungle indirectly, but didn't quite work. So now they're completely removing the passive on jungle monsters. So the amount of attack speed you're getting is basically the same, because now like you have half of the stacks, so each stack gives you double the attack speed. Basically there's no change here. So Leap Strike, slight damage increase, that's good. Empower, slight damage increase. However, this is a very spammable spell that's up every like 2 seconds or so. So what this means is that you will actually get quite a bit of damage increase because you'll spam this quite a lot. Counter Strike cooldown going down in early levels means that you have it up more often in lane, which is really, Jax getting quite a huge buff all across the board. Jhin getting a buff, damage and from bouncing on the dancing grenade going up by quite a big percentage. However, honestly, as Jhin is my favorite champion and as a Jhin player, I honestly think that this is a nice buff, but the times that you get damage amp is not a lot. Like, there are really rare cases that you can bounce like a lot of times and get a lot of damage, and at most you bounce like once or twice. Like you kill 2 minions and bounce it to an enemy, so that could help. But in team fights, late game team fights, this doesn't make any difference at all, because you won't be executing multiple enemies with your dancing grenade unless you get super lucky. So it overall in team fights doesn't matter. Helps his laning phase a little bit, so that's a nice buff. Root duration going up by 0.25 seconds. Getting the Veigar treatment, and now from the Veigar buff, I've realized that 0.25 seconds is not something that's negligible. However, Jhin it's a lot harder to hit Jin's W than Veigar's cage, and this is also single target. So while I think this will help, it definitely is not going to be as impactful as like Veigar's buff. So, but overall, Jin's getting 2 buffs, I'm happy, so we'll leave it at that. Karma, on the other hand, still really strong, of course, getting a nerf. Mana cost on her Q going up by 10. Don't think that's going to hurt her too much. But Inspire, the base shield going down by quite a significant amount in late game, and as well as the Mantra enhanced one. And this is pretty significant, like 30 less shield on both the empowered one and the normal one is pretty significant of an amount, especially when the enhancement goes onto 2 people. So this is definitely a step in the right direction, but I still think Karma will be really strong despite this nerf. Now Leona getting a buff again. Now I say again because I think over the course of like the past, like I don't know how many months, Leona's Zenith Blade, which is her E, has gone a range buff twice already. This is her 3rd range buff. It used to be 7. they buffed it to 7.5, then they buffed it to 8, and then now they're buffing it to 8.5. So this is the third range increase her Zenith Blade is getting. Now I think the issue is that Rad is expecting Leona to be like a more meta support than what she is, or at least getting picked more often, but she really isn't. So because of that, they're actually trying to give her bigger engage range in order to try to compensate. I guess compensate for the fact that her defenses are not really that good. She's meant to be an engager, it's not really that tanky, at least in my opinion. But yeah, so they're trying to basically make her more viable, and they're also giving the Solar Flare the same treatment, which is now going from 9.5 to 10.5. So I think sooner or later Leona will be good at some point in time, because it's quite clear that they want Leona to be good, and they're constantly increasing her range and increasing her stats, increasing her defenses on her W, and she's basically only been getting buffs like for the past year or so. So one day, there's gonna be a straw that breaks the camel's back, and Leona is gonna be meta. So is this that change? I don't know. It's possible, because ranges are some quite huge of a deal. So we'll see about that. Now Lux, another like change that I find quite curious, because they're trying to buff support Lux, where her second shield value, which is when it's returning, the staff is returning, the base is going up by a lot. Like just look at like 165 to 220. Like if you max W as Lux support, this is a huge shield, and the AP ratio is going up as well. However, excuse me, remember there was a time where Lux support was S plus tier and OP. Now that was only for 1 or 2 patches, because they nerfed it immediately after, but the nerf that they gave was actually the second shield value, base amount, and AP ratio going down. Now this is basically either a reversion, or it's a reversion plus a buff onto that amount that they nerfed it. So based on past history, Lux support could be really good after this buff, just based on past history, because you could still, like, even if you're like going Lux support, like you could still build AP and still build damage build, but you just max your W, and the value you're getting from that, like the huge shield amount plus the AP ratio, is huge, and it's an AoE team shield. Don't forget about that. It's AoE team shield. Like, imagine 220 plus 40% ability power. Let's say you get about let's say like after 2 items, I don't know if you'll get to like 300, but getting like 300 shield on 5 people is already better than karma like on 2 people. Like, where is it? Like, you get 300 shield like on your empowered one on like 2 people. Like, think about what Lux can do for like a shield on 300 shield on 5 people. So yeah, that's just to put it in perspective, that Lux support probably is going to be really good. Now Nautilus, the dredge line width against units going up by a little bit, and width against walls going down by a little bit. So basically this means it's going to be a little bit easier to hit enemies. The hitbox is basically a little bit bigger, so a little bit easier to connect with that dredge line against enemies, and a little bit less so against walls. So now I assume that that's because people miss enemies and hit walls. I've seen that happen a lot of times before. But also, if you're trying to hit a wall to escape, this could be this could not be a really good thing for you. And the Titan's Wrath, which is W monster damage ratio going up by 50%, so it makes Nautilus jungle that much better. Now Nasus cooldown on his Q is going up by a really significant amount, like 1.5 seconds at like early ranks is quite huge, but generally Nasus maxes this first, so like at like level like what 6 or 7, this wouldn't really matter anymore, because you're back to your normal 4 seconds. But definitely gonna be weaker early game. Stacking is gonna be quite a lot harder, because especially at early levels, like you're struggling to get your cooldown back up to stack your siphoning strike. So this is gonna hurt Nasus quite a bit. Pyke getting AD per level increased by nearly 1, so about 14 extra AD at max rank. Bone Skewer damage going up by a little bit. Phantom Undertow damage going up by not significant, but like decent amount. And I think the real most decent change, or not decent, the most significant change is armor penetration ratio for stun duration is going up from 1% to 1.5%. So basically, when you buy more armor penetration, it's going to increase the stun duration for longer, which of course more CC is always going to be a strong buff for any champion. So Pyke gonna get more CC from that. Now Riven, I knew she was good all along. I always have her in like the S tier for like jungle and Baron lane, but for so many patches no one was playing her. Now people finally start catching on and playing Riven, so now Riven's starting to get nerfed all over again. And the nerf she's getting is mainly on her E, where the shield amount you're going to be getting is a lot less. Now I think this is not gonna matter too much late game. Probably gonna matter a lot more in the laning phase, like in her traits. But she only lasts for like 1 second, so like in late game it really doesn't matter. But in the laning phase, that 1 second, like when you're in a skirmish, really does matter. So I think early game is gonna hurt her a lot more, and but to compensate, her base health and her base health regeneration is going up a little bit so that she doesn't get too nerfed in the early levels. But I still think Riven's gonna be really strong despite this nerf. Sets Haymaker, his W, bonus AD ratio, going from 10% per 180 to 15% per 180. Now, I don't believe Set will ever reach 280. He builds like what? Black Cleaver, he builds Divine Sunder, then he goes for like either full tank or like Starix Death's Dance and GA kind of build. So I believe he'll be like 100 and something AD. I don't believe he'll reach 200. Unless you go for like Blade of the Rune King kind of build or something, some kind of more damagey build. But basically getting a little bit of extra damage. Like basically you're getting about 5% extra damage. Of course that's going to be significant. 5% is pretty significant, so it's going to hurt a bit more. Facebreaker, his E. Cooldown going down by just a little bit. Now Shyvana, this is a part that there is a debate about, especially like internal debate with myself, that is. So now Shyvana is getting a passive rework that she no longer gets ability evolves from killing dragons. Instead she's getting it from getting stacks from like kills on champions, takedowns on champions, rift and baron kills, dragon kills, as well as large monster kills. So at 100 stacks, you will actually evolve one of your abilities. Now, from first to last, so you evolve Q, then W, then E, then R. So now the issue here is that large monster kills, does that count only buffs, or does that count like the large raptor, the large krug, the large wolf, and the grom, and the scuttle for that matter? Because if it counts like all the large monsters, it basically means that if you full clear a jungle, you're getting 6 times 8 of those, which is like what, 72? I think that ain't 24, 48. You're getting 48 stacks. You're getting 48 stacks just from doing a full clear. If you get yourself the skull, you're gonna be getting 56, and that is a lot of stacks, which basically means that like by the first dragon, you can first clear a jungle twice. You'll get your first evolve on your Q, and you pretty much will be almost guaranteed to get all of your evolves by like the end of the game. However, if large monster kills only counts red and blue buff, you basically only get 16 stacks from clearing your whole jungle. Now I think that this could be the case because don't forget that in the previous iteration of Shyvana, it's possible to not get a single evolve on a single ability if you don't get a single dragon. So I think that probably the one that you get stacks on buffs makes more sense. However, if you only get stacks on buffs, means you get, like, let's say you get 16, you get 32 after 2 clears, let's say you get the first dragon, you're at 70 something, and you still need to get like 2 champion takedowns at the minimum to get your first evolve. Now it seems that if you count it as only buffs, it's way too hard to get your evolves. Like even killing dragons don't get you your evolves. But if you count it as killing large monsters, as in like wolves and gromp count as getting stacks, it's way too easy to get your evolves. So I really don't know like which way it actually is. So I'm really kind of confused on that one. And as I'm speaking, my game actually has already updated. So maybe as I'm talking, I might actually test that out. But anyways, next up we have Singe. Singe is getting a 40 base health nerf as well as a 7-second ult cooldown nerf. Now that's a pretty huge nerf for Singe, but honestly I don't really even see Singe at all in ranked. I think he's only really popular in pro play, so aside from like that, I never really actually see Singe at all. So this will hurt Singe players of course, but he's not too popular in my opinion. Alright, next up, Teemo getting a rework. His blinding dart, first up before his rework, blinding dart range going from 5 to 5.5, and his guerrilla warfare, his stealth ability, mana cost going up, cooldown going up. However, the channel time is getting cut in half, which basically overall this is a buff in my opinion. Now his Noxus trap is getting changed to the Elite PC version. So previously what happened for our Wild Rift version of Teemo is when you step on a trap, it'll create an area of poison where you can technically flash out of or you can dash out of. However, now when you hit the poison, there will be an explosion of the same size, but that area will like basically disappear almost instantaneously, like maybe after a half a second or so. And after that person who stepped on that mushroom permanently gets hit by that poison. Like there's no way of removing that poison. You can't like QSS it or anything. You can cleanse it, but there's no cleanse in Wild Rift. So basically, you're guaranteed to take all of that damage, and that basically makes Teemo way better of a champion, and therefore makes him a lot more irritating. But on the a slight side note is that you will not get as good of wave clear with this version of Teemo's ultimate compared to the previous version. So Teemo like in ARAM is going to be a lot worse, but Teemo as a whole is going to be a whole lot better, a whole lot more annoying. So I really don't like that. Hopefully Teemo doesn't get too popular. And yeah, so next up, Twisted Fate. So Twisted Fate, his AD is going, the AD per level going down, and basically they're trying to remove AD Twisted Fate from the game. So now Wildcard's AP ratio going up slightly barely makes a difference. Stack Deck attack speed going down by a significant amount. Now remember that like many eons of buffs ago, they did buff his attack speed on the Stack Deck because they wanted to make AD Twisted Fate more viable. So now they're kind of reversing that decision and basically just reverting it. So they don't want AD Twisted Fate no more. Now Varus getting a cooldown nerf on his piercing arrow, while getting a buff on his quiver on hit. So basically they want less of lethality Varus and more of like attack speed on hit Varus, which is not going to happen because Varus is so inferior to other like basic attack champions that lethality Varus is basically going to be the way to go. So basically this means that lethality Varus is going to be a bit weaker because of his piercing arrows cooldown, but he does build quite a bit of ability haste, so this shouldn't hurt him too much in the grand scheme of things. Now Veigar, you know he's been a menace after the couple of buffs that he got. So what's gonna happen? He's gonna be getting a nerf, of course. So what is that nerf though? So what's gonna happen is his health per level is going down slightly, his armor per level going down slightly, and in my opinion this is not too much of a nerf. Now the reason for that is of course because it doesn't quite matter because he can be killed so easily anyway. He was always like weak to assassins and he could always get basically destroyed by assassins anyway. So basically they're doubling down on his weakness, but I don't really even think they necessarily needed to double down on his weakness because he was already so weak because of that. So yeah, I don't think it's too big of a nerf to Veigar in the grand scheme of things. Wukong on the hand getting the PC rework where his Warrior Trickster, which is his W, can now dash through walls. But take note that the dash range is incredibly short. So you can dash through walls like the Dragon Wall, for example, but you cannot dash through huge walls like the buff wall, like the red buff wall, for example. You can't dash through that. Now, the final champion change, we have Xin Zhao. So Xin Zhao getting a 1 second cooldown increase on his 5 talent strike. Now, I don't really think this really matters, so we're not going to talk too much about that. Now, we're getting the ultimate cooldown adjustments for champions. So basically, nearly every champion in the game is getting a ultimate cooldown decrease. Now we're gonna just briefly scroll through the list here. Now these are the changes. Now if you want to take a look at these changes, you need to actually pause the video and just take a look at the changes yourself, or you could also alternatively go to this patch notes, which is of course on the Wild Rift website, and you can find out what those changes exactly are. So as we are doing that, I'm actually in the practice tool at the moment, trying to figure out if Shyvana gets stacks from getting large monsters, as in the wolves, and I found out that she does. So Shyvana does indeed get stacks on the large monsters like the large wolf, the large gromp, that kind of thing. So basically Shyvana is getting buffed, essentially. It's going to be a lot easier for Shyvana to stack up her passive, so Shyvana is in fact getting buffed. So there we have it. That is the conclusion to that. So Shyvana is going to be getting her evolves on her abilities way more often, which is going to be a huge buff for Shyvana. I was scrolling past Tristana and I said Tristana, but yeah. Okay, so what do I think about these ultimate cooldown changes? Now, I think that this doesn't really make sense at all because there are so many champions that were menaces because of the ultimate cooldowns. Now, think about Evelyn at a certain point in time where they eventually nerfed her ultimate cooldown by like 20 plus seconds. Think about champions like Fizz that was a menace because of his ult cooldown. Champions like Galio, like there's so many champions that the ult was like so OP that they nerfed it, like Garen as well at one point. Like so many champions that they managed to balance by nerfing their ult cooldown. Now there is the argument that hey, you know, their ult cooldown like Evelyn's ult cooldown might be reduced, but everyone else's ult cooldown is also reduced. But it's not equivalent, you see. Like champions ultimates are not built equivalently. Like having a lower cooldown Kennen ultimate, a low cooldown Evelyn ultimate is so much more impactful than having something like a low cooldown Jhin ultimate. Like you're not gonna use Jhin ultimate that often anyways. Like you don't even have the opportunity to use it. So it's really not equivalent in my opinion. Like it's really not equivalent. And most of the ult cooldowns most of ult cooldowns are reduced by 5 seconds or like some ult cooldowns are not even reduced at anything at base rank or max rank, but generally all the ult cooldowns are getting reduced by somewhere between 20 to 0. So they're either getting reduced by 0, 5, 10, 15, or 20, like all across the board, as you guys can see. So yeah, the ult cooldowns are not all equivalent. So I think this is not really a good change, because some champions like were only balanced by their ult cooldowns, like those that I mentioned, and now I think that there could be some balancing that needs to happen in the next patch. But yeah, so aside from that, to compensate, they actually reduced the duration of ultimate on champions like Renekton, Nasus, Riven, and Rengar. So Riven getting a double nerf here. And so is Nasus actually. The issue with this is that despite having your ultimate up more often, but having a lower duration when you use your ultimate itself is kind of doesn't make sense, because in like a huge team fight, for example, you're fighting for Elder Dragon, you're fighting for Baron, your ult is gonna last 3 seconds less. It is not like when you use your ult at the start of the fight, by the time the like later part of the fight comes on, you're gonna use your ultimate again. That's not the case, because your ult cooldown still isn't that short. Like it's still like 50 seconds or whatever it is. So it's really not gonna be that short, and this is gonna be an issue. So this change bad as well. I don't like it. Earth changes, I really don't care about Earth changes at all, because I don't care about Earth. If you do, you can take a look at the changes yourself. Here are some of the random. Why is there a random picture of like emotes here? But yeah. So next up we have items. So this is a really long video. Like look at all these. So next up we have a revamp to the enchantment system. New enchantment, the Magnetron enchant. So Magnetron enchant allows you to dash to an ally champion within 5 range, and you will taunt the closest enemy within 2 range for 1 second. It only taunts 1 enemy per activation, only affects champions, and the taunt duration is reduced to 0.5 if the person has already been taunted by someone else's Magnetron enchant. The cost is 800. Take note. So the significant part to take note about this is firstly the fact that it is an enchant. So for this entire section, we're focusing on enchants, and you have to take note that enchants are competing with existing enchants. So like you'll be competing with Proto Belt, Stasis, like, you know, for supports, you're going to be competing with Redemption and Locket, you know, stuff like that. So Magnetron enchant basically has two uses that I can think of. The first use is to actually protect your allies. So for example, if you're a Leona who has already engaged and used up all your spells, you need to return to your ADC site to peel for them, because they have an assassin on them. The Magnetron enchant can dash you back to them in order to protect them. Think of it like a Braum W with a taunt. So that is going to be very useful, but I really question if like engagers, like this is obviously meant for, like, in my opinion, I think it's meant for support, engaged support champions. Like, will you really take this? Because you could be taking Protobelt, you could be taking Locket, you could be taking Redemption. So I don't really know if you would take this. But the second use, which I find way more interesting, is to follow up on an engage. Like, think about, like, for example, if a Malphite ults in and you have a Amumu on your team, think about if a Amumu Magnetron enchants to the Malphite and ults, to follow up. I think that's a way more interesting way to use the enchant. And I think that for champions that that want to get into the middle of team fights, that don't necessarily have the easiest time to do so, think of champions like Kennen, could really benefit from this if they have a teammate that can get into the middle of the team already, like a Malphite. So I think we could be seeing a lot of wombo combos coming up with this Magnetron enchant. Oh yeah, really interesting one. Next up, we have the Repulsor enchant. So Repulsor enchant cost 500. You will knock enemies back to 3.5 range away from you. Now, this is meant. They say this is meant for to be like for ADCs to protect themselves, but I really don't think that that's gonna be good, because we have the reworked Quicksilver that we're gonna get to in a few minutes. We have the stasis, and I don't think you would take anything other than the stasis or the Quicksilver, or even the Proto Belt. So I really don't think repulsors will work too well for ADCs. But yet again, I think a really interesting use for repulsor is like using it as like a pushback tool for engager. So think about like Leona Zenith Blade into somebody. You're now behind the person, you activate repulsor to push that person towards your team. I think that could be a more interesting use of the repulsor. So I still think this is going to be like a lot more for tank engage than it is for ADC. But I still think that tank engage will benefit a lot more from even the Magnetron enchant, but more so something like a Proto Belt, Gargoyle, or something like that. Don't think that repulsor enchant is going to be too popular as well. Now the Veil enchant is actually something I think could be actually popular. This is obviously meant to be for supports. You give a nearby ally a 3-second spell shield, like basically like a Banshee's Veil or a Edge of Night shield, and you cannot cast it on yourself, so it's a support item. Cost 500 only. Now where could this be useful? Basically, if you have like one guy on your team, like 1v9ing the game, you can get the Veil enchant for that guy. Like, think about it, like if your Yasuo is 10-0, give him the Veil enchant, that kind of thing. So this could be useful in those niche scenarios, and if of course there are like spells on the enemy team that you need to Veil enchant, like maybe a Veigar Cage, maybe a Blitzcrank Hook, maybe a Pike Hook, something like that. But of course, yeah, it's the same problem with something like an Edge of Night or like a Banshee's Veil. Like, think about what if you Veil enchant an Ezreal Q or a Varus Arrow. Like, it's gonna be completely useless. So yeah, and also it's competing against Redemption and Locket, which is gonna be almost guaranteed to get it's not guaranteed, but it's gonna be more consistent than the Veil enchant. So this could maybe not used as well. So the 3 new enchants, while very interesting in concept, I think it's really hard to compete against the existing pool of enchants. Now next up we got Boots of Swiftness, which now becomes the Boots of Furor. So what happens is it's reducing its movement speed back to the normal amount. No more movement speed slow reduction, but when you attack a target, you gain 30 movement speed over 2 seconds. Now this is pretty huge. Now I think this is going to be the new default boots for all ADCs, because this getting movement speed is way more useful than getting like lifesteal or getting like defenses. So I think this is going to be the new default boots for every single ADC. Yeah, pretty much. Fimbulwinter, now on ranged champions, you get a reduction from 70% to 50%. I'm not too sure which ranged champion built Fimbulwinter in the first place, but if you're building it previously, you can't do that no more, at least not at the same effect. But I really don't know who has been building Fimbulwinter that's ranged. So Gargoyle enchant getting a complete rework. Now instead of gaining health, you gain a shield that absorbs 30% of your max health that decays over 4 seconds, and your shield value is increased by 100% if there are 3 or more nearby enemies. Now basically, it's basically the same as what it did, but now it gives you shield instead of health. So it's just more visual, basically, because you can see that shield over the health bar, but essentially it does the same thing. Like, there's basically no change to Gargoyle enchant. Portable enchant getting a 300 gold cost increase, now in line with the rest of the enchants, now at 800, which I think does make sense. Hullbreaker, basically all the resistance values for yourself and minions getting halved on ranged champions. So basically ranged champions can't take Hullbreaker anymore. I think champions like Akshan top. I'm curious to know if Graves can still take Hullbreaker. I think that Graves counts as a ranged champion. I think Graves Hullbreaker may not work anymore. So yeah, Quicksilver enchant getting a rework. So now you get crowd control immunity for half a second when you cast the Quicksilver, and you also gain 30% tenacity and slow resist for 1.5 seconds. You can still use it while you're like stunned or rooted, like when you're in CC, except for knockups. But this crowd control immunity does count for knockup. So if you see like a Malphite running at you and you press it before he outs you, you will immune the knockup. So that is something to take note of. So Quicksilver enchant I think now going to be a lot more viable because it's a lot easier to use, and if you use it properly, you can even avoid knockup. So I think Quicksilver enchant going to be built a lot more often, at least compared to previously. Now the Shadows enchant, Twin Shadows, got removed. Not many people built it anyway. And Stasis, as the obviously most OP enchant, is going up to 1000 gold, making it the most expensive enchant in the game. Now Do I think Stasis Enchant still going to be good despite this gold increase? Yes. Because nothing can compare to having 2.5 seconds of invulnerability where your team can come over and back you up and push enemies away from you and threaten enemies, that kind of thing. So Stasis Enchant, I think, still will be really good. I still think will likely be the default enchant for a lot of like range carries, like most of the ADCs basically. Alright, so next up, rune changes now. Really long video, this one. Conqueror. Now, stacks increasing from 5 to 6. Now, the max AD is going up by a little bit, of course, because there's one extra stack, and the base amount as well. Same goes for AP. Now, you no longer gain an extra 10% or 7% bonus adaptive damage. Instead, you're getting 8% or 5% physical and magical vamp. Now, what this means is that basically, like all the ADCs that can take lethal tempo should take lethal tempo, because you're gonna get better value from lethal tempo. Now, 5% like vamp on range is not even as good as hunter vampirism, and it's 5% is really low. On melee, I think it's not too bad. 8% is not too bad. But basically, for ranged champions, anybody who can take a rune other than Conqueror will do that. But there are a lot of champions that can't really do that, like Ezreal, for example, doesn't really take Conqueror. So Ezreal's gonna have a problem here, because Ezreal can't take lethal tempo, and Ezreal kind of needs to take Conqueror. But Conqueror kind of not too good at the moment. So does he take Ahri, or or does he take Kraken Slayer? Because Kraken Slayer now allows you to proc on hit. So spells like Ezreal's Q is now gonna actually proc Kraken Slayer. So I don't know. Anyways, Fleet Footwork healing modifier also works against monsters. So there are a lot of champions, like for example Camille or Mundo, who when they jungle they take Fleet Footwork just to have a healthier jungle cure, and mostly because they have no better option. So it's no longer going to work against monsters. Yeah, but not too many junglers take Fleet Footwork anyway. Shouldn't matter too much to most people. Grasp is getting pretty huge buff. So now the damage you do, instead of just 3% max health, is now 3% max health plus 20% AD plus 10% AP, and you're getting range modifier is going down from 50% to 40%. I still think this is going to be a buff for someone like Senna, because 20% AD extra and she builds AD. It's going to be pretty huge. Although the efficiency is going to be down by a little bit, but I still think it's a buff to Senna, and like most people is going to, like, whoever takes Grass, normally even bruises build a little bit of AD, so this is going to make them do more damage overall, which is going to be good for Grasp users. Now, Kraken is getting a buff in terms of damage in the late game, but as I said, like, late game damage on Kraken doesn't really matter. Like, honestly, I still think like Ezreal probably will benefit more from like getting that extra like 36 AD from Conqueror than like Kraken Slayer's true damage, but I really don't know. I still think Kraken Slayer is a horrible rune. Maybe it's good in the early game, but I personally am not a fan of Kraken Slayer, but we'll have to see like who takes Kraken Slayer, especially after the on-hit buff. Now, Brutal, you no longer gain 7 bonus AD and 14 AP. Now you gain 7 to 14 bonus damage on hit against champions. So this means two things. It only works on basic attacks or on hit attacks. And it no longer works against monsters. So I love this change because basically, personally, I only take Brutal on junglers. And basically, it's sort of like a jungle tax where you have to take Brutal on junglers to have a equivalent clear to the enemy. Because if the enemy takes Brutal and you don't, they're going to clear faster than you, and that's going to be a problem. So you're kind of forced to take Brutal, which I really hate. And now with this not working on monsters, now junglers can actually take things like Hunter Vampirism, Triumph, or whatever they actually want to take. So I actually really like this change. But in my opinion, this completely kills the Brutal rune. Especially it doesn't work on spells anymore, unless they're on hit, of course. Basically, no one is going to take Brutal anymore. At least I think Brutal is far and away the worst rune in the domination, like compared to all of the rest after this nerf. So that's that. Okay, so now to compensate for the jungle clear, you're getting extra burn damage on Smite, so you're gonna be able to clear roughly at the same speed, I think, without the Brutal. So also like small changes to like in terms of the ground red buff and blue buff in terms of their health, all going down by a little bit, making it easier to clear. But on the second and third clear, they're gonna be getting more health per level. So yeah, first clear most important, basically gonna be easier to clear. Alright, so now, turret playing system. Basically, the League of Legends PC turret playing system is getting imported into Wild Rift. So for the first 4 minutes, used to be the first 4 minutes, you get extra 90 armor and magic resist for turrets, whereas now it's only for the first 3 minutes and it's only 50 for the mid lane and Baron lane one. And for the first 4 minutes, Dragon lane turret no longer gains increased defense. I love this because there are so many times where I can push my opponent out of lane in Dragon lane, and the turret is so tanky that I can't even take one plate. This is amazing. I love this change. Next up, turret plating. Only outer turrets will have turret plating same as League PC, but the turret plating only lasts until 6 minutes and 30. Now, first up, there are two implications of this. The first implication is this is a really early game thing where you're only gonna get turret plates if you manage to get an advantage in lane, whereas previously you get turret plates regardless of what time it is in the game. So this is really significant because you actually have to be winning early game to get turret plates. The second thing that is very significant is the second Rift Herald is now going to be a lot weaker. Because the first Rift Herald that spawns at 5 minutes, you can use that to take down towers and turret plates. So I think, honestly, I feel that the first Rift Herald is going to be more important than the Dragon, just because of how much gold turret plates give. But I think the second Dragon is going to be more important than the second Rift Herald, because you can no longer get turret plates anymore. And now instead of having 3 turret plates, you have 5 tower plates on the tower equally distributed, and you still get 150 per plating. So like if you take down all 5 tower plates, that's 5 times 150, which is like what, 300, 600, 750 gold, and that's in addition to taking down the outer tower for 200 gold. So you can get literally like nearly 1k gold for solo taking down the whole tower, which is possible if you're, really strong early game champion. However, of course, the inhib and the inner tower no longer gives tower plating, and the inner tower local gold is now going to 350, so same as the PC now, where the inner tower is worth more gold, and inhib tower also going up by a little bit. And now there's this thing, I don't know if this was a thing previously, but now there's this thing where outer turrets gain bonus defenses based on when the health is no more than... Oh, okay, I get it. Basically, it's the same thing as the... I interpreted this as based on your champion health, but basically what this is trying to say is the lower health the turret gets, the more tanky the tower gets. So when the tower is like below 20% health, it's going to get 240 extra resistance, which is going to make it a lot harder to take down. This is why it's more worth it to use the Rift Herald when there are like 2 plates left. Like in League PC is when there are 2 plates left. I don't know how much damage the Rift Herald is going to do to the Wild Rift towers after this turret playing rework, but yeah. So early game siege protection, turrets gain extra. This is pretty much the same thing. They basically reduce the amount to like a more reasonable amount to have like multiple champions taking down turrets within the first 6:30 of the game instead of the first 3 minutes. This is basically to force you to stay in lane and not like 4 men try to go for 1 tower in after the first dragon or something. So this is trying to basically extend the laning phase. Now this might mean that there's going to be an actual laning phase in Wild Rift now that's going to be all the way until like 6 minutes 30. We'll have to see about that. So now trinkets and wards. Now basically there's this new, like in my opinion it's a nerf, where you can only have one unique kind of trinket. So basically if you, like for example as a jungle, you normally put down control ward, then you switch to sweeper. The moment you activate your sweeper, that control ward is going to be removed. Same thing if you control ward and you change to normal yellow trinket. When you put yellow trinket, your control ward is going to be automatically removed. Now basically this means there's going to be a lot less vision over the entire map, basically, is what it means. Now, enchantment switch system, basically, now you can easily switch enchantments without having to sell the enchantment, buy the boots, buy the second tier boots, then buy the enchantment. So basically, the cost of switching enchantment is going to be the same as selling everything, then buying everything. However, the most significant change here is after you swap, it's going to be like 20% of the enchantment's max cooldown. Now, what this means is that you can no longer like recall, change to TP and TP to a fight immediately. That is what it means. So that's going to be really significant. So yeah, just take note of that. You can no longer like instantly TP the fights. So now we got Skin, Star Guardians all releasing tomorrow, and Godfist Lee Sin coming on 21st of July. Accessories as shown. A lot of accessories. And yeah, we made it to the end of the patch, guys. I think it was like close to an hour or maybe over an hour. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully, you know, you learned something from this and my explanations and my discussions. Thank you guys so much for watching this super duper long video, if you even actually made it to the end of the video, and goodbye.